Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your Archbishop of Banterbury, and of course, your Chancellor of Cheerfulness, and lest we not forget, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, Rob casting at you on this lovely Saturday afternoon in the middle of July, well, more toward the end of July. Coming at you from the Robservatory, all of you imagination connoisseurs that make up this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. A lot of news dropping, various movie news dropping at our virtual San Diego Comic-Con, if you're keeping up with that. New Mutants looks pretty cool. They showed the first 2 minutes of the movie. I guess the first time the Demon Bear's rampaging. Call me, color me, stoked. I think that... I'm excited. I'm excited. Justice Con is going on today, a fan-run convention that I was doing a little speaking on this morning with Zack Snyder's The Snyder Cut. It's basically a convention, fan-run, put together by fans that is entirely devoted to the release of the Snyder Cut. Well, they are, and it's coming out. So it'll be interesting to see what news comes out of that. I've heard Zack Snyder said he wanted to break the internet. I heard that this morning, so I don't know what that means. Should be some exciting announcements coming out of that. All kinds of stuff happening, so we'll see. We'll see if there's movie news. I don't know if there'll be any movies to watch in the year 2020, but you never know. New Mutants has not been taken off its late August date. And I suspect they might not take it off of its date. We'll see. Obviously, it's been sitting around a long time. There's not the kind of financial commitment there is to, say, other movies like No Time to Die or Tenet. New Mutants is a much less costly endeavor that Disney inherited from Fox. So I can imagine seeing it it might very well play in theaters. It might, because it does not need the kind of exposure, theatrical exposure, that something like Tenet does. And so we'll see. It'll be really interesting to see if the movie comes out. Speaking of Tenet, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, gentle beings, however you identify across the 28 known galaxies, I don't know if you saw this from yesterday. Christopher Nolan's Tenet may still open in Europe this summer. Minori Ravindran wrote this yesterday in Variety. Warner Brothers is reaching out to international exhibitors about a possible late August launch for Christopher Nolan's Tenet. If it takes place, it would mean that the twisty spy thriller, which was expected to be among the highest-grossing summer releases, will have some sort of popcorn season debut. Exhibitors in the UK, France, and Spain have been told by the studio to plan for an August 26th or 28th launch. The dates are not confirmed, though sources indicate that talks are positive. It's understood the studio is also aiming to release the film early in Asia, with exhibitors in the region expecting to receive a new date in the next few days. It's worth noting, however, that given the fast-changing nature of the global health crisis, these plans could change if the situation worsens and more hotspots emerge. One exhibitor contacted by the studio, who asked to remain anonymous, told Variety that the tipping point in favor of an international release ahead of a U.S. bow ultimately comes down to the reopening of China cinemas this past week. The strong Asian box office performance for the Train to Busan sequel Peninsula, which made a sensational debut with $20.8 million across 4 markets, is believed to have buoyed the studio bosses. Warner Brothers' plans for an early release in Europe, and particularly Spain, which could see a second wave of COVID-19, could follow the rationale taken by Sony Pictures releasing in moving up the local release of Santiago Segura's family comedy, Father, There Is Only One 2, the country's biggest potential blockbuster for 2020 from August 7th to July 29th. The understanding is that an earlier release allows the sequel a clearer run at box office in case more theaters in Spain shutter. Warner Brothers officially removed Tenet from the release calendar on Monday, but promised to share a new 2020 release date imminently. The delay, which marks the third postponement for the pick, was a major blow to international exhibitors who have been basing their recovery business models around the release of U.S. tentpoles. Tenet was originally scheduled to debut on July 17th, but was pushed back to July 31st and then August 12th. Its most recent delay followed renewed spikes of COVID-19 cases in major U.S. markets such as Florida and Texas. Disney on Thursday followed suit in undating Mulan from its recent August 21st perch, marking the film's fourth delay. When it pushed back the release of Tenet on Monday, Warner Brothers hinted that it might upend the traditional playbook of having a domestic release occur roughly at the same time as an overseas launch. We are not treating Tenet like a traditional global day-and-date release, and our upcoming marketing and distribution plans will reflect that, Warner Brothers chairman Toby Emmerich said in this statement. There are concerns, however, that for a film like Tenet, which relies on keeping its secrets close to the chest, a foreign debut could result in piracy, potentially spoiling some of the film's surprises. The studio's game of musical chairs for Tenet has been frustrating for international exhibitors who, though sympathetic to the dire situation in some U.S. states, are in desperate need of new product to sustain their venues. If the exhibition community doesn't have any new movies in the next few months, there will not be an exhibition community. For most, if not all, big studio movies, between 70% to 80% of all box office is offshore, and it feels like that's been forgotten. One senior exhibitor source told Variety earlier this week, just ahead of Tenet's third delay. Jocelyn Bouisse, managing director of CRG Cinemas, France's second biggest multiplex chain, said at the time it would be a catastrophe if both Tenet and Mulan are further delayed, two scenarios that came to pass in the span of 4 days. We've been sticking to it against all odds because we don't want people to forget about us, but we don't know how long we can hold out or hold up like this. Warner Brothers declined to comment for the story. I was talking about this morning on a podcast. I mean, as you all know, movie theaters are large chunks of real estate, and most places they're not owned outright by their parent companies. They're renting. So basically, movie theaters are costing a lot of money to their parent companies every month, and there's no income happening at all. And I love the movie-going experience. I do not want to see this situation turn into, I don't want to see a big screen exhibition going away. I think that would be a damn shame. But the situation that we're in, unfortunately, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, already most of the big movies that I was looking forward to, certainly this year, have been moved out of 2020. So even if theaters are opening, unless the studios decide to, I don't know, pull back some of those movies back into 2020. I guess it's going to really rely on how the world is dealing with all of this. So we'll see. But I'm kind of hoping, to be honest, Tenet does get a release in Europe and the release goes well. I would like to see that happen. I would like to see theatrical distribution, at least a shred of hope that it will come back. It's going to be interesting to see if any of the studios actually take one of these larger tentpole movies and make it SVOD. Like I had said, we talked about on the John Campea show. I asked John, like, what would you pay to see Tenet? And he said, well, he might pay $20. Well, they could never make the money back. They could never make the money they need to make back if everybody's paying only $20. But if they could make it like a pay-per-view fight, and people would pay $50, but the question is, would they? Would families pay $50 or even more to see Tenet in their homes? Could they do an SVOD release? I don't think an SVOD release would work now because people just aren't used to spending that kind of money on a movie. Maybe they would for something, at least domestic audiences. But I don't know. Maybe they would. Like I would. I'd drop $50 to see Tenet. Because I really want to see it. And if you've got a family of 4 in LA, tickets are, 4 of us go to the movies, it's $80. You know, you're looking at $20 tickets, sometimes even more at the ArcLight. So paying $50 to see a first-run movie like Tenet could be an event. I obviously want to see it on a giant IMAX screen. I don't want to watch it at home. But if that's not an option, I'd really like to see the film. But again, it's rough. I don't know where we're going. Don't know what's going to happen. Really don't know. So it's going to be, we got to watch out and see what is going to happen with Tenet and where is this all going to go? Because I really don't know. We are in uncharted territory, which is, yeah, I don't know. Well, I had for whatever reason, a deluge of letters from people over the last day. So I figured, heck, rather than title this, that was just a quick article I wanted to read about Tenet, but, I figured why not just focus on letters today and what you guys all have to say. And the first one, would you believe it? The first letter comes from Ian Samuels. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Ian Samuels. Rob and fellow Robservationists. In the genre of fantasy, one piece of work stands above all others. Pretty much everything in the fantasy genre that came after could trace at least some of its influence to just one piece of work. Even other genres were influenced. It started in a small way in 1937. In 1937, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien published The Hobbit, which follows the adventures of Bilbo Baggins. In July 1954, the world of The Hobbit got a lot bigger with The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. So, where did Tolkien's influence come from to write this epic? Well, there were a number of sources. One was Tolkien's fascination with the Welsh language. Many writers before Tolkien had drawn influence from Greek and Roman mythology. Some of Tolkien's ideas came from Greek and Roman mythology, but also much came from the largely untapped at the time Norse mythology. One of his strongest influences came from his experiences as a soldier in the trenches during World War I. Despite never having officially revealed a diagnosis or anything, some psychologists have suggested that Tolkien may have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and his writing may have been a kind of therapy for him. Some of the best authors of the fantasy genre, Ursula K. Le Guin, George R.R. Martin, Terry Pratchett, Robert Jordan, Raymond Feist, David Eddings, and many, many more, cited Tolkien as their main influence. But even in the world of sci-fi, George Lucas and J. Michael Straczynski were influenced by Tolkien. In The Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf falls into the land of the shadow, Khazad-dûm. In Babylon 5, the homeworld of the shadows was Zahadum. Coincidence? I don't think so. Of course, even J.K. Rowling was influenced by Tolkien, not that she would admit it. That bitch was so full of shit, insisting Harry Potter was all her own stuff, and she had come up with everything and wouldn't admit to anyone else influencing her. Sorry, Rowling. Rant over. So, yes, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's influences, and the legacy he has left. Obviously, anybody who works in the fantasy genre owes a great debt of gratitude to J.R.R. Tolkien. But I think it's a possibility that maybe J.K. Rowling never read Tolkien at some point, because all of this stuff is sort of all filtered into the pop culture zeitgeist, and these stories, the stories that he tells, there's so many different variations on those themes. And while, yes, I'm sure she was influenced, but it might not have been a direct influence. It might have happened, I don't know, through cultural osmosis, I suppose. But one never knows. One never knows. But yeah, I think she was probably influenced by Tolkien. This one comes from Josh B., who says, "Hi, Robert. I just watched episode 464. Thank you for mentioning the site Stinky Tuna. I've just bought Song of the South, same as you. I was wondering, did you have any problems playing it on your player? I have only one player in the house, and it wouldn't play." Well, it might be because it's a DVD-R or a Blu-ray R. My player will play just about anything I put in it from all regions, and so and any kind of data discs I might put in it. So it could be a problem with your player. But the disc, mine works, and my friend Cliff Stevenson, or as we call him, Geek Santa, Cliff's worked well, and he was raving about the discs. So, when you have, well, let's call it what it is. It's a bootleg, and sometimes things don't play on finicky players. But I can assure you the disc is great. Really, really, really well done. Retired Throg King of Asgard is here. He says, "I'm not afraid of aliens, acts of a deity, whatever. As an atheist, I'm more worried about Tweedle Trump and Tweedle GOP in the next election. The dogs seem to be barking because a Terminator is near. Well, Throg, yes, you never know. I mean, you know what? I'll tell you something. I haven't let Gilbert and Tallulah on the show in a long, long time, so I figured why not let them in? And people complained. Couldn't believe it. I mean, they're part of the show. They're part of the DNA of Robservations. So it was good to have them. I enjoyed having them yesterday. This next one comes from Remo Ugolini. That's a cool name. Remo Ugolini. 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 This is actually for whining about movies. So I'm not going to read Remo Ugolini's letter. I'll read it on the next episode of Whining About Movies. This one comes from Raymond Starkey. Thank you for reading my letter. I appreciate that it was a touchy subject, but to follow up, King Arthur was a great leader from the Dark Ages, as most people are aware. The time did not have much recorded history, and the person the legend was based on protected England from the Saxons somewhere between the 5th and 6th century, like many of our legends. They are written around fact, much like Robin Hood, who, as we are aware, was based on the life of Robin of Locksley. So that is why I found myself writing so venomously. I use the Martin Luther King reference because the African-American community would, and rightly so, be outraged if his race was flipped. And though I may be on my own, I do find it disgusting when mythological people who are more fact than fiction, when you delve into it a little, are misrepresented. By the way, I totally agree with your point about Jesus. He's of Middle Eastern descent. No doubt the Roman Empire was very meticulous with their census taking. Thanks again, Rob, for the show. You definitely deserve all of the accolades you have. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think we're living in a sort of in a strange time. Like I'm always saying, look, we have to evolve. We're always evolving. And right now, there's a lot of weird things happening with our culture. And as I have always said, you can't trade one oppression for another. That doesn't work. And this idea that we want to erase our problematic history is ridiculous. All of human history is problematic. We have done nothing but be horrible to one another since we climbed down from the trees. And the idea that we're going to somehow figure out a way to absolve the sins of the past by getting rid of indicators of our history, I think is wrong. Now, do I think there should be Confederate statues? No. The Confederacy was a rebel nation. They were treasonous. But I do think that you absolutely should have museums dedicated to that period of time in our history. It's important that people remember. You know, there's that deep fake video I posted that I guess MIT did of Nixon talking about how there was an Apollo 11 disaster and, you know, the astronauts died and didn't land on the moon. And I watched that and I'm like, that's what we need to be careful of. I mean, in Interstellar, it was more in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. It's a lot more in the original script, but they had rewritten history to make it seem like we never landed on the moon. And as we get further and further away from history itself, it's easier to rewrite the past because there's no one around that really remembers it. So I really do think we have to remember where we came from, and we have to remember and consider where we're going and what we've done. And again, I think we're overcompensating. I think it'll come back. But right now we're living through a very strange, bizarre time in our cultural history, especially in the United States. I think we've gone a little mad. And, I don't think coming to terms with the reality of our history is not something we should be afraid of doing, but we should embrace it. So, yes, Robin of Locksley, King Arthur, all based on real people. And I don't think that there's anything wrong delving into that and acknowledging that that's the case. The Justin is here with, as he says, a very quick, rambling rant. Justin says, you sharing your Comic-Con stories the other day made me reflect on the importance of conventions, as well as my own first convention experience. It was Wizard World 2007, then affectionately referred to as the Chicago Comic-Con. I was 18 and debuting my first self-published comic. Congratulations. I know I'm 13 years late, but good for you, sir. Back then, my only knowledge of cons were seeing photos and advertisements in the back of Wizard magazine. Social media was still in its infancy, and most conventions had no yearly online coverage of their events. So while I had a concept of how large a gathering of fellow comic and film fans could be, I was not prepared for how intimate it could be. My story seems like fiction, but its truth is a testament to the magic of these large gatherings. Along with meeting some lifelong friends at that first con, I was very fortunate to meet a few of my heroes. I got to interact with the legendary Rowdy Roddy Piper in a way few have. It was early on the first day of the con, and he had just set up his booth mere minutes before I speechlessly walked up to him and held out my hand. He proceeded to pull me in for a hug, as if we'd known each other for years. He didn't have to do that, but when he did, I immediately felt at ease with this icon. After talking to him for a few minutes, I had only one request: a chest slap. All I wanted was a signature chop from the hot rod himself. After a small chuckle and bashful decline, he pushed my head back and chopped me square between my barely formed pecs. I sold it like a pro, and he gave me another big hug before I limped away. As I walked through the aisle of his fellow legends, they began to playfully heckle me, all before all proceeding to chop me as well. I can't even recall how many of those old-school superstars drunkenly took their shot, but everyone from the Bushwhackers to Greg Valentine contributed to the slowly forming red welts below my neck. It was like a dream. I was assaulted by the very legends I'd grown up watching. How many people can say that? As I walked away to lick my wounds, I hear a very distinct voice shout out in my direction. "Very strong, good job." I turn around, and it was Lou Ferrigno. The Incredible Hulk compliments me. And well, that's a story for another time. This was just a small slice of that perfect first convention. Needless to say, none of my other con experiences ever reached those heights, and that is okay. I've been so grateful for the moments I did have. As an artist, this was my yearly pick-me-up, digging through crates to find original artwork, meeting artists and writers I'd grown up reading, networking with editors and doing portfolio reviews. I find myself either refreshed and ready to take on a new project, or a fire lit underneath me to make something worthwhile. But these few days to celebrate and dive into the fandom gave me enough of a boost to keep going. Although I've been to many cons in a few different states, had things gone well, this would have been my first year attending the Mecca that is San Diego Comic-Con. But things are tough all over, and it's more important that we get a handle on the pandemic first. I just hope that whatever version of reality we're living in doesn't last too long, because this could have been someone else's perfect first year. We all could use something to bring us together. The world is so ugly right now, and even in our fandom, we're seeing some division. We need these gatherings. We need to meet and bow at the altar of our fandom, to give us all something to look forward to. Personally, writing and drawing my own comic during isolation has me going a tad bit stir-crazy, and I would have loved to decompress at a booth with friends this year. But I guess we still have this, the Post-Geek Singularity and your wonderful videos. The Justin. P.S. Rob, can a boy get a follow back on Instagram? The Justin. I feel like I've known you forever and we go way back like car seats and spinal cords. Well, Justin, yes, I will follow you on Instagram right now. Since you asked, because why not? Let's see. The underscore JUS JUSTN. It's looking for you. You know what? I didn't put it in N. I believe I found it. There you go. I'm following you back. Done. What a great letter, by the way. Thanks for writing that in. You know, I've loved Comic-Con. I've had great experiences that inspired me. I went to my friend Shade Roop and I, between my junior and senior year in high school in Seattle. I saved up all summer and went on a road trip. This was 1984. and we went to the 42nd World Science Fiction Convention in Anaheim. And so Shade and I, being from Mercer Island, Washington, right outside of Seattle, Shade and I drove. We went to visit my aunt in San Francisco. Then we went to visit his aunt and uncle in Palm Springs. And then we finally made it to L.A. and Anaheim. And at that convention, now I had been to conventions, local conventions, but I'd never driven to a convention, much less crossed multiple states to get there. And it was an amazing experience. I had all kinds of crazy experiences. I met also one of my very good friends, Taylor White, who I've known for years. But there, I actually, waiting for an elevator at the hotel, I met Carrie O'Quinn, the publisher of Starlog magazine. I mean, I lived for Starlog magazine, and we had a great conversation about Ayn Rand, and it was nuts. There I was talking to Carrie O'Quinn about the Fountainhead. It was crazy. And he wrote about it in his From the Bridge column. And and since he moved to L.A. and I see him at events, I always walk up and say hello. And it was so, and he was so nurturing and so warm. And I told him how much Starlog meant to me, and it was a big deal getting Starlog every month. And I'd been getting it since I was 10, so I probably just turned 17. So it was pretty cool. I mean, my buddy and I taking a road trip at 17, that was pretty amazing. So that was really impactful for me. That convention was something else. I mean, it was incredible. And many of the as I talked a lot about, many of the times I spent at San Diego, I've always had great moments. I mean, this would have been my 32nd San Diego Comic-Con, and so many great conversations and people I've met, both professionals and friends, and I think that does keep you going. It's a very nurturing thing. I mean, I haven't caught up with a lot of the panels that have been going on, these virtual panels. I mean, it's not a replacement for going to the convention, but it's not bad. And some of the virtual panels have been great. I just wanted to remind all of you that tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Pacific Standard Time, our Indie Filmmakers Survival Guide that's hosted by Chris Gore, Film Threat's Chris Gore. I'm on that, and also it was a treat for me to do this because I got to be with my old boss Charlie Band, and it was a lot of fun. And I think that Comic-Con's done a pretty good thing this year with that. I mean, if you can't go to Comic-Con, I've always wondered, there are so many great panels at Comic-Con, and why they weren't all recorded and put up on YouTube, I don't know. And maybe this will be the beginning of that. If the convention does come back next year, maybe we'll see these panels will all go up, because why? It always seems silly to me that, yes, going to Comic-Con is not just about going to the panels. It's about the fellowship and your fellow fans. But they get a lot of great talented people together, and why not put those virtual panels up to show them to people? So I think it's really cool that so many of these virtual panels are allowed to be seen. So really terrific. And thanks for sharing that letter, Justin. That is what a great remembrance. William Santiago is here. I wonder if that's like... whenever I see the word Santiago, I always think of A Few Good Men. Hi, Rob. I am also a Star Citizen, and I'm happy to hear that you now have a game package to engage with our community. Now, mind you, this is still early development. I know many people say it's been 8 years. How can it be early? But it is true. Many games aren't even recognized as a game until their last 18 or 24 months of development. I personally didn't expect that Star Citizen will launch until 2024 and Squadron 42 until late 2021 or early 2022. As I frequently put it, it's a barely cogent collection of tech demos. This is very much a situation that the plane is being built in flight. I'm sure that the person who sent you the game, Bunyan Snipe, the game package, has done quite a bit to prepare you for your entry, but I also offer my services for a different perspective. To give you some of my background, I've been in-game Q&A off and on since 1994 with Meridian 59 up until my last alpha beta of Neverwinter back just before learning about Star Citizen in 2012. I have been the de facto owner and operator of a restaurant. The real owner preferred that I run everything while he gambled. Guess what happened to the business? Where I took a restaurant that was going to be closed and turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. I understand what it is like to build a plane in flight, although this one was going into a mountain when I took over. I have a skill stack that allows me to have a different perspective than those of my fellow citizens. If you run into problems and your citizen support can't adequately answer for you, feel free to hit me up through my email address. I'm sure that there are likely many who have also made this offer, but I hope that my perspective will help illuminate unseen avenues of thought for you if times become challenging. As I frequently say, you have to find the zen of game development. Because this game is still in development, there's little in the way of a tutorial, as any tutorial is outdated roughly every 3 months. There are many willing to help, though you may find the forums are what you would expect. They can be full of people who are not friendly, depending on who you ask and where you ask it. Be sure to know that there have been a few people who have expressed dissatisfaction even with the initial install and launch of the persistent universe. Some even have problems with the initial install. Rest assured that extreme patience is needed at the start, and frequently it helps to have a partner to help guide you. I'm available for Discord starting at 6 p.m. your time until midnight. I'm in Michigan, basically 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. here. I'm a night owl. If you need someone to help, I have about 80% of the flight-ready ships, mostly in the lower-end single-seaters, that you are more than welcome to use or test out or tour. Just contact me at the email provided, and we can set up a time to play. Hope to see you soon. Thank you for your time. William Santiago. Fly safe. And this is interesting. There's I wouldn't call it an emoji, but emoticon, I guess, of a small 0 and a 7. And he writes, in case you didn't know, the 07 is a man saluting. It's common among flight sims, though this font doesn't do it justice. Wow, that's interesting. Well, William, you are the only person, other than Bunyan sending me the package in the first place, to reach out. So I will hit you up. That's all I need to fall down the rabbit hole of a game like Star Citizen. I've been watching my friend Trey in Texas play it, and it looks interesting. And I mean, it's incredible. So I'm in. I am in. Looking forward to it. So thanks for sending me this. This is very nice. Good emails today. What a community we have. Let's see. Omar94 is here. Omar94 says, hi, Rob. This might not make sense to you and others, as I'm trying to understand this myself, but here goes. When it comes to actors now, I feel like we no longer have movie stars, so to speak. What I mean is that while there are plenty of big-name actors, I don't know if I would call them movie stars. I just refer to them as big-name actors. That said, though, I do think there's only one person I would consider a movie star now, and that's Tom Cruise. I feel he is the last movie star, as he is that actor who has constantly been in the spotlight and keeps staying there. However, I do think Tom Hanks could come in a close second, as he has also consistently been in the spotlight and stays there. I don't know if I'm right, though, as I'm still trying to understand how I'm thinking this through. Thanks, and live long and prosper. You know, I think there's others. I would say that Meryl Streep is a movie star. Now, obviously, she's more chameleon-like. I mean, the one thing I think that is different about movie stars, especially the golden age of cinema, is they radiated almost sort of they had a divine aura about them. They were larger than life. They descended from the heavens, you know. And if you look at like a Humphrey Bogart movie, I love Humphrey Bogart, but you know, Humphrey Bogart never really melted into the roles. I mean, he was great, but you were always very aware that you were watching Humphrey Bogart, and I think that might. I don't know if that was a factor of the people or the movies or the time or a combination of all of that, but even like Sean Connery, for instance, Sean Connery to me seemed like a movie star. When you watch early Bond films, the original Bonds, Sean Connery, while he was James Bond, but it was Sean Connery you were watching, and he melded in to James Bond. Like I mean, he was magnetic. You couldn't take your eyes off of him. But when I watch, say, Daniel Craig, I think Daniel Craig is a fine actor, but I don't feel he descended from the heavens to play the role. And maybe that's only because I grew up with Connery. But I think that, movie stars, the glamour, the glitz, I think you're right. And having met Tom Cruise, I've told the story about how I was waiting, me and my friends Mary and Sean Fanning, we went to a screening of Valkyrie. Brian Singer asked us to come to watch the film. He didn't tell me anything about it other than to show up at Laser Pacific on a Sunday morning. And I want to say we showed up at 10 a.m. And when we were waiting at the screening room, we were the only people there. And then Tom Cruise, Suri, and Katie Holmes walked in. And it was interesting because he's like, hey, man, who are you guys? He didn't know us. And I ended up talking for an hour. And I had a great conversation with Tom Cruise. And it was, again, he didn't know me, but I explained I was Brian's documentarian. And I didn't say, why didn't you let me come on and work on this movie, dude? But he didn't really want that, the behind-the-scenes coverage that I was, what we specialized in after doing Superman and Chronicles of Narnia, where we were on set every day. But what was really interesting about Tom Cruise was the guy's incredibly magnetic. I mean, when you're around him, and so is someone like, for instance, Hugh Jackman. When I interviewed him on the set of X-Men 2, or X2, he was so charismatic. Like, that guy is a star. I mean, Hugh Jackman is a star, but Tom Cruise was too. And he really, you could feel like when you're around movie stars, even me, where I've been on so many film sets, you still are a bit starstruck. And Tom Cruise was somebody I'd grown up with. And this was, what was this, 2008, 2009, Valkyrie came out. And I had been to the edit bay a lot, so I'd seen the movie develop. But I just flat out asked him, because he might not have wanted to talk. I said, hey, man, can I ask you something? And he was like, sure. And I asked him, I said, do you choose the material first, or do you choose the filmmaker first? Because I said to him, I go, you've had a pretty incredible career and a run of working with really great filmmakers on really great projects. And I said, even going back as far as Paul Brickman and Risky Business, we were off to the races. Because once I asked him that question, which was, I would think, a fairly intelligent question, he knew that I wasn't, I was very curious, and it was a question that he immediately just zeroed in on. And we had about an hour-long conversation. It was like, and he was so happy that I could just speak extemporaneously and know all of his film work and who directed what. And we basically went through his whole filmography and talked about these things. And look, the guy, obviously, when you have had that much success and you've been in the public eye since, Risky Business came out in 1983. And, even we're 25 years into Tom Cruise being a star when I had this conversation. And now we're almost 35 years. Well, we are. We're 37 years since Risky Business came out now. And I think that he is a movie star. And it was really interesting talking to him because I obviously didn't ask him anything personal. I didn't ask him about Scientology. I just talked movies with him. And one of the most engaging people I've met. And he truly is a star, and he truly is passionate about filmmaking. And it was very interesting because he was surprised that because when you have to understand, when movie stars are out and promoting movies, they're in promotion mode. Like, there's a certain mindset. They're getting they have to answer the same questions over and over and over every day. So it's seldom that a movie star is out in the wild and has a conversation about movies that can engage them more than because usually they don't get those kinds of questions. But because of my DVD work, I had almost a decade of talking to stars from movies. So I didn't have any problem asking intelligent questions. It was really interesting. And how do you judge somebody after one interaction? But he was very impressive, and he was everything I wanted him to be. And getting him to talk about movies, it made me it made me think, God, I'd love to one day get together with him. If I ever ran into him again, it would be great to I'd love to sit down and have dinner with him and just talk about his career, because he's had such a long and storied career. And I think he just was, I really liked him. I really liked him a lot. But I agree with you. I think that there's very few movie stars left, because I think a lot of that actually, it kind of stopped. It changed in the 70s, where our movie stars were not, I mean, think about it. Even though we had stars like Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider and Al Pacino and Clint Eastwood, and there was all these great stars, they were not necessarily the beautiful people. And I mean, Al Pacino playing Serpico in grungy New York, and it was different. The glitz and the glamour was stripped away for a much more gritty street level reality that I think made for better films. But I think that's where the long, slow decline of the movie star began, was when movies were embracing reality more so than anything else. When you had a lot of filmmakers, with whether it was Friedkin with documentary film experience, or Coppola or something, trying to bring a gritty realism, Martin Scorsese, a gritty realism, it changed things. And I think that now we have actors, but not so much when it comes to movie stars. I think it's a great question. And Omar goes on. Hi, Rob. For a while now, there's been a big debate on whether certain superheroes known for not killing should kill. Now, I'm not sure about you and others, but I don't have a problem if they kill. That's probably why I would never be able to run a comic book company like DC and Marvel, as people would freak the hell out as some characters can start killing people left and right. I would say to the creators things like, yeah, let Batman kill the Joker. Superman can kill Darkseid, Mongol, Metallo, Parasite, whoever. Or let Spider-Man go and kill the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, or whomever. Don't get me wrong, I don't want these characters to become bloodthirsty, sadistic psychopaths, but every once in a while, I would let the heroes kill their enemies. The only problem with that is creators would have to start creating new villains on a regular basis. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, this debate, obviously, comic books, American superhero comic books, were always sort of targeted at youth. And then as they became more sophisticated, especially in the 80s when you had characters or creators like Frank Miller working on characters like Daredevil, comics started to grow up. When Bullseye killed Daredevil and the ramifications of that, or what happened to Gwen Stacy. And then as comic books themselves, people like Alan Moore doing Swamp Thing, and then Watchmen or V for Vendetta, Howard Chaykin doing My Beloved American Flag, things started to change and get more sophisticated. And then I've had this debate with so many people for so long, but like when I saw Man of Steel, one of the things I really liked about Zack Snyder's Man of Steel is that it was a science fiction film. It really was. Krypton was an alien planet, and I loved that we got to see Krypton portrayed as a very alien planet, that looked like it came off the cover of a 70s prog rock record. I loved all that. And when, people always complain that, well, this Superman wouldn't do this, Superman wouldn't do that. Well, in my mind, in Man of Steel, Superman isn't even Superman yet. He just figured out who he was, and he doesn't know anything about mastering his power. And then suddenly, he's confronted with a person that was designed from birth to be a warlord, and it's not like there was anything Superman could do. Zod's like, look, I'm going to kill every human being, and I'm going to reshape this planet into New Krypton. What are you going to do about it? Superman, what could he do? I mean, unless there was a way you could throw Zod back into the Phantom Zone, but how's Superman supposed to know that? He's just figured out who he was. He doesn't know. So he basically fought a battle royale, and it was either going to be Zod dies and humanity is saved, or Zod lives. What was Superman going to do with Zod? Imprison him on the moon? Zod would have escaped. And the Earth was literally, Superman literally saves billions of people in that movie. So I don't have a problem with Superman killing. Is it good that he had to kill? No. It'll probably haunt him for the rest of his days. But I remember when John Byrne took over Superman and he ended up killing, in the Pocket Universe, he killed Zod, Ursa, and Non. It was a big deal. But I mean, in something like that, I I think it would be real in the real world. If Batman or Superman existed in, say, our world today, and Man of Steel postulated that what if Superman came to Earth today, our world, what would it be like? There'd be a lot of killing going on. Because look who you're dealing with. In our world today, you have people that will fly airplanes into tall buildings. Now, when you live in that world, I don't think Superman, if he was around on 9/11, would necessarily set down those planes. I mean, maybe you would. I don't know, but it's never really bothered me that much. I know it bothers a lot of people, but it doesn't bother me. I mean, depending on the story you're telling, there's some people need some killing. William La Rochelle is here. William says, "Hey Rob, thinking about villains and the principle that an action movie is only as strong as the villain's plan, I wonder how true that is and how much humor a heavy can have without losing tension. Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor is fun to listen to despite being evil enough to pose a threat. I remember you referring to Diamonds Are Forever, a movie I rewatched after Sid Haig passed away. I'd forgotten he was in it, but it was interesting to see him working with the front business of a funeral parlor. When you mentioned liking the film in your youth, but later in life deciding that I can't hang with this, I figured maybe you referred to the Bruce Glover hitman and his partner who are gay for comic relief, years before Javier Bardem was hailed as the first gay villain in a Bond movie. I recall a scene-capping moment of Bruce Glover and his partner walking away after an explosion. The shot ends with them holding hands, a moment that was trimmed out of Toronto City's TV broadcast in the 90s. If God had wanted man to fly, he would have given him wings, Mr. Kidd. The shot ends with them holding hands. I don't know if the other gay references or implications were cut because I checked out at that point. Maybe that's another argument for physical media to avoid filtering the sensibilities of a film through those of more tentative executives or activists. But there's an argument to be made for having true believers as villains and not having them be the butt of a joke. This, in Bond movies or beyond in action in general, often brings to mind a passage from an Al Franken book, The Truth with Jokes. And I wonder how much can simply not apply only to politics, but movies in general, and the machinations behind them, where the consumer can be taken for granted or just plain taken. Actually, what I found chilling as I searched for this quote years later in the current climate is that this machine and philosophy is still pervasive, and I don't know how to push back against it. A senior Bush advisor summarized the Bush's team way of thinking to journalist Ron Suskind in the summer of 2002. The article says that guys like me were, quote, in what we call the reality-based community, which he defined as people who, quote, believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of discernible reality. I nodded and murmured something about Enlightenment principles and empiricism. He cut me off. That's not the way the world works anymore, he continued. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities in which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to study just what we do. Doesn't that sound like the kind of speech a Bond villain would make just before falling into his own Shark Tank? Bad screenwriters get paid good money to come up with monologues like that, but this is real. The Bush inner circle sees the world as having spectators and participants. So that is the snippet from Al Franken's book. The powers behind the throne might not have changed much in 18 years. I wonder whether this kind of thing motivates activists or creative people to get cracking and act, or whether we can freeze just knowing how people use back channels to decapitate the next tall poppy that might make a difference. To be bold might be to introduce yourself to every villain with, "My name is Bond, James Bond," sure in the confidence that none of them will answer you with overt outrage over how many of his colleagues in evil you have killed. You mean the secret agent James Bond? In a world where people want clicks and attention, you may notice even YouTubers picking fights with YouTube groups and calling them out, hoping to set themselves up as a target or villain in that conflict and get notoriety. But even on a larger scale, where the stakes are life and death, it is hard to see what steps can be taken, covert or overt, to stop such craziness as people getting rounded up in the Portland area and taken away in vans, or the Uyghur Muslims in China loaded into trains in the modern day. What villain plans can live up to that and have the urgency that we feel and can't act upon? Also wondering about the definition of protagonist and antagonist. Considering that a dramaturge convinced me to introduce a lead character later than planned and also use Die Hard to explain that the person with the plan, the protagonist, is Hans Gruber, and the person acting against his plan and foiling it, the fly in the ointment, is the antagonist, John McClane. Whereas Chief Brody, planning to close the beaches, makes him the expected protagonist in Jaws, and Mayor Larry Vaughn the antagonist pushing against him, it just sounds like a mess. Do we even have to bother with those terms then? I'd like to think of myself as a protagonist, but I want to smash some plans and machinations of the ruling class. Or maybe once we are effective enough in fighting the power, we can be taken aside and given the Faustian deal. The Faust and the Furious. I don't know. William La Rochelle, Toronto. Come on, man. What YouTube show gets letters like this? Fantastic letter. Wow, a lot to unpack. I don't even know where to begin. Look, to your first point, I think that any movie which pits a protagonist or antagonist against one another, it's always better if the antagonist is smart and acts in such a way that, smart antagonists, they're dangerous, and they create real stakes. And I think that's the most important thing. Whenever you have an antagonist, you want your antagonist to be smart, because then they're dangerous and you don't know what you're in for. And that was like one of the great things about Die Hard is, as the movie progressed, the plan was revealed. And one of the things that people never talk about in Die Hard is that their plan was going to end with everybody at that Nakatomi Christmas party getting killed. They were going to blow up all those people in order to cover their tracks. They were some diabolical villains, those motherfuckers. They were really bad hombres. And that was a lot of fun to see the fly in the ointment, to see Bruce Willis take on these guys that were smart. Now, they didn't understand. They had meticulously planned. They didn't understand. It works because Bruce Willis was so fly by the seat of his pants. It wasn't like he was outsmarting them, and I think that's what makes he's acting. You never know what he's going to do, because he is the everyman. He's a cop. He's a beat cop in New York City. He's smart and resourceful, but against a group of Eurotrash international terrorists, what are you going to do? And so I think the genius of that movie is it sets up, first of all, an irresistibly fun scenario. Ultimately, any action movie that happens, if you're going to watch, they have to be, first and foremost, more than anything, they have to be fun. You have to find the scenario itself delicious. Whether you're watching a 60s movie like Ice Station Zebra or Where Eagles Dare, spy thrillers in wartime or Cold War, whatever, it's got to be fun. You have to be like, oh man, I love this scenario. It's delicious. You're eating a great meal, and that's what a great movie is like. And I think the problem that I had with Diamonds Forever was not that they had gay hitmen. The gay hitmen were cliche, and I thought the portrayal was, it's problematic. I would say, look, man, as much as I like James Bond, I can sit there and go, why do they have to be, the way they are? Why can't gay hitmen be ruthless and cunning? That's why, I loved the homoeroticism between Bond and Silva in Skyfall. I thought that was a great touch. Just like I liked when Le Chiffre tortures Bond, which is right out of the book, but smashes his balls in. I think that if you ever have two guys going mano a mano, having a healthy undercurrent of homoeroticism is always helpful. It's always good because it brings them, it puts them on a more intimate level. And who's gonna fuck who, literally or figuratively, we're gonna see. I think that adds to the whole thing. I mean, I think you brought up a lot of about where we're going right now. I think ultimately the real world will always win out. We can create whatever narratives that we want to create. You don't want to believe in the reality of the situation, but the real world will ultimately beat us down into submission at some point. We can talk about, hey, you can be a woke activist all you want, but the reality is, at the end of the day, people need to eat. Human beings have different points of view. Not everybody is totally enlightened, and it's hard to try and bend society and culture to one way or another, because people, look, we as Americans, we are fiercely protective of our independence as sovereign individuals, and I think that's what makes this country great. I mean, if you go back down and you actually read, here's what I find frustrating. The founding fathers they were born in a world where there was reality happening all the time. You know, they didn't invent slavery. Slavery had been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Slavery was part of the normal part of society. Was it good? No. Should we treat human beings as chattel? Absolutely not. But does the fact that that world had slavery in it, does that somehow negate the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights and things like that? Are we going to cancel America because, I mean, if you go back and you actually read the Constitution and you actually read the Bill of Rights, you know, all men are created equal. Did that apply? I mean, no, there was a group of human beings in the Americas that were considered not as human as others were, which is abhorrent and terrible and awful. And I'm not saying that it was a good thing. I'm just saying that was the world of the time. But what they were able to do, the fact that their words 250 years later or whatever can resonate now. You know, if you look at the things, they apply to everybody. They must apply to everybody or they apply to nobody. And now, you know, we should be smart enough to say, okay, when these words were written, yes, there was horrible shit going on with lots of people. We fought a civil war. Slavery was god-awful. And the legacy of slavery continues on even today. And as I've said many times on this show, black Americans have never had true equality. And we need to always be working toward that. We have to be working toward a world where all people are free. You know, all peoples should be able to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and families, whatever people want. And I'm hoping that the, you know, it's like when you think about drama, poetics or something. You go back and you talk about Aristotelian work. Was Aristotle onto something 2,000 years ago? I mean, I'm not up on Aristotle's predilections as a person, but his words resonate even now. You know, 2,000 years later, there's a lot of value in things that were said. The same is true of different philosophical disciplines from many different world religions or schools of thought. And you know, I fear that we're going to live in a world where all of these good works are eliminated. People saying, well, you know, now it's time that America herself, because she was founded during a problematic time in our history, we've got to blow it all up and rebuild it. Rebuild it how? You know, I would love to see we live I would love to see us living in a country of unbelievably well-read, educated, and smart people. But one of the things that I see, especially with all of this, the culture wars that are going on now, is I don't see a lot of great thinkers. I'm waiting to see who are our new leaders that are going to arise and really are thoughtful and really understand all of this and aren't demanding that look, it's easier to tear shit down than it is to build it up. What do they say in Star Trek 2? I want to live in a world where we have smart, thoughtful leaders that are creating new things, that are not making demands on people. You can't sit there and blame everybody today for things that happened before they were born. You can't blame everybody for what your ancestors did. Has no bearing on what's going on right now. We have to move forward, and we have to think forward. We're never going to go back and erase the sins of our past. We can't. Those sins are etched into history. There's nothing we can do. But what we can do is figure out what kind of world we're going to live in from now on, moving forward. And how are we going to do that? We need smart people. We need smart people that understand life is nuance, and it's not just one thing or another. You can't base your whole philosophy of life based on one situation or one thing that you need to find justice for or whatever. It has to be, we live in a continuum that's happening all the time. There's 100,000 things that happen every single day that we always have to be watchful of and mindful of. But mostly what we need to be mindful of is one another. And I think inherently, we all know how we want to be treated. How do we want to be treated? We know. And if we live in a world where we would all be honest with ourselves and realize, I've got some, I don't need somebody to come along and tell me that I have some kind of problematic behavior. I know. We all know. We all really know deep down in our hearts. What we need to be able to talk about these things in an educated, nuanced, smart manner. And we have to realize that the world is not going to be just the way you want it. I want it to be just like this. You have to believe exactly what I say right now. That's not fair. But anyway, I did really like this letter you wrote, and it's very interesting. I mean, I would just hope that I've always been optimistic about the human race, and I've always liked people. And I would prefer to live in a world where people are creating new things. They're moving forward. They're exploring their own thoughts. I don't like it when people come and tell me how I'm supposed to think or how they expect the world to think. No. I'd much rather live in a world where people are open to debate, and they realize that, look, I might not like everything you have to say, but that doesn't mean I should dismiss your value as a human being. There's got to be some kind of ground. I get criticized a lot for going on various YouTube channels. And I'm like, look, at the the base of it all, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And I think even the problematic YouTube channels, or quote problematic YouTube channels, that people have taken me to task for going on, I am all about meeting people that we have a healthy love for science fiction, fantasy, and horror. We are imagination connoisseurs. And I'll talk to anybody that way. And I hope that the message that I'm trying to spread is, let's talk. Let's have an open dialogue. Let's be able to sit down no matter who anybody is. Can you sit down and break bread with somebody that you might not agree with everything they have to say, and have a nice civil conversation? I think that's the best skill to have. And I've been on a lifelong journey to try and understand where people are coming from. That's my whole deal. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of off in the weeds, but hey, William, great letter. Thank you very much for that one. Very thought-provoking. What are you guys saying here in the chat? Let's go and see. I know you guys have been firing in questions, so let's go down and see what they are. Willow sends in a tip. Who do you think is the hottest redhead? I personally think the color works much better on women than men. Who's the hottest redhead? Well, that's like in all of human history? That would be tough to say. I mean, look, when I think of hot redheads, the first person that pops into my mind is Christina Hendricks from Mad Men. But then again, Christina Hendricks is like, she's a goddess among lesser mortals. I can't. She doesn't seem like she's even real. I mean, she's voluptuous and buxom and has red hair, and I love redheads that have perfectly white skin. I have a very specific taste in redheads. I don't know if I could tell you who the hottest ones are, but I think most of the redheads, like I'm a big fan of Julianne Moore, you know, because I like the characters they play. I like Amy Adams. Would I call Amy Adams hot? No, but she's very attractive. Julianne Moore. Isla Fisher. I love Isla Fisher. I think she's a beautiful redhead, and she's perky and funny, and I like her personality. Rose, who married Jon Snow. Rose, what's her last name? I forget. Her, you know. I think it's unfair. I like Jessica Chastain. And, you know, she's more classical, she's got a severe beauty to her. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you might be right about, like, I like Domhnall Gleeson as a dude who's basically a ginger. I think it suits him. But I think, you know, it's different. It's different for all people. Like everybody, I mean, I think people of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, certain people just have a cool look to them. It doesn't matter. Like, I think Lupita Nyong'o is one of the most beautiful women on the planet Earth. I think she's amazing, but she's also very unique looking. I love her darker skin. I love her face. And, you know, she doesn't remind me of anybody else. And I think that's cool. That's what I want. Like, even, like I've talked about this before, like, I don't think Meryl Streep necessarily was your traditional, say, California beauty, the way Farrah Fawcett Majors was. But if you go back and you look at Meryl Streep in early movies like The Deer Hunter or Manhattan, I always fall back on those, she was a striking cinematic presence. Her features or whatever, I mean, they belonged on film. But yeah, and that's what I like. I mean, I like unique looking people. But in terms of throughout the years, there has to be many beautiful redheads. I couldn't even begin to describe them. I mean, there's even an Instagram feed, Redheads of the World or whatever. Although there's a lot of people that dye their hair red. I don't like that. I like real red hair, almost strawberry blondish. Very specific in my redheaded tastes. I don't know. Who do you think is the hottest redhead? Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. Stubble McShave says, did you see that there's a behind-the-scenes book of Game of Thrones coming out called Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon? I read it in Entertainment Weekly. I did not know. About that book, but I would get that book. I would love to get that book. Kaz Graphics is here. Hello, Kaz. By the way, Kaz is our official cheesemonger of the Burnettwork and Robservations. I know I didn't think cheesemonger was a real word. I thought it was made up, but it's true. Cheesemonger is a real thing. And Kaz has been hooking up Elizabeth and I with Beecher's cheese. I feel that this is a time where I can stop the show for a minute. I'm being not paid, but can we just talk about Beecher's smoked flagship mac and cheese? Oh my God, it's unbelievable. So Kaz Graphics, for those of you who don't know, is the official cheesemonger of the Burnettwork. Kaz says, thank you so much for whining about movies doing The Fisher King. I love this movie. I've got the power. That's right. What a dope song from the 90s. Thanks for injecting some positive vibes in our life. Well, Kaz, you know, I feel myself as pretty positive. I forgot that I've got the power is a big part of that because Jeff Bridges' character is a radio DJ. Well, excuse me. Yeah, we'll do that on Wednesday night, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do The Fisher King. Dan V is here and sends in a tip and says, hey, I wanted to expand last night on my Sing Street and La La Land comparison. I do feel that La La Land is overrated. The first 30 minutes could be cut with nothing lost. Oh, but I love the dance number on the freeway. I love it. The film is very good from the pool party on. Gosling and Stone aren't good singers. No, they're not, but I do love them. I mean, I think one of the things that I love about La La Land is I believe it could happen. You know, these people are having fun. You know, yeah. I look. I like La La Land. I unashamedly like La La Land a lot because, there's still a. I watch La La Land, and it's kind of sometimes how I feel on the inside about Los Angeles and living here. There is magic. You do meet people that sometimes you just wind up dancing with them or singing with them. You never know. Mark C. sends in a super chat and says, the old movie stars were larger than life. Then they opened their mouths and we discovered how nihilistic and corrupt Hollywood is. The Hollywood star has dimmed as their social media presence has risen. Yeah, but, like everybody else, it's like anybody who's artistic, any artistic community, whether, you were living in Florence, Italy or something, and people who are making any kind of art are political. Certainly, Hollywood had its own, like the blacklist era. You had Hollywood screenwriters being accused of being communists. There were lives that were ruined. I think, look, people who are living or working in artistic communities, they have, I think, inherently liberal ways of looking at the world. And that's always going to be the case. I think the thing about Hollywood is, of all of the artistic communities that have ever existed, Hollywood's one of the most visible, especially on a global scale. Because look, anyone who works in film knows that actors work the least on a film, the least amount. Now, I'm not saying they don't work their asses off, because they do. But a director could work on a movie for literally decades, like Scorsese trying to get Gangs of New York made. And then yet the actors come, they shoot their parts, and they leave, and a director continues on for another year editing a movie. So we elevate these people to a certain level, but they're just people after all. But you might be right. I have to tell you that working in production, while it can be creatively cutthroat, I've had horrible disappointments, many more disappointments in my life than I've had successes in the entertainment business. But I do still find something magical about it, and I guess the one thing for me is I just enjoy the process of things. So, I can continue on. But when you're working in production, I have not seen a lot of corruption, as you put it, and nihilism, and I haven't seen a lot of that, because when you're working on films, there's something inherently optimistic about creating something from nothing. Now, yes, is getting on set horrible? Yes, it's awful. Trying to convince people you're dealing with people, maniacal egos, but when you get to deal with the artisans and the people that, the one thing about production is most of the people that work in production go from job to job to job. It's the getting on set that's the hard part. And by the way, it's really, really, really hard. And so it weeds out. There's all this talk about inclusion and diversity in Hollywood now. I'm all for that, because that the great thing about diversity is that you have new voices that will tell new and different stories. But it's not going to make it any easier for them. All of you want to bring more diversity in Hollywood, that's great. But it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman or LGBTQ, whatever you are, you're going to realize it's horrible. And it's horrible. It's horrible for everybody. It really, really is. So, and people will learn. They will learn. Dan V sends in a tip and says, the distribution of Sing Street was botched and it deserved more recognition. It does annoy me that Boyhood, which I don't find great, to be so praised. There are a lot better coming of age films than Boyhood over the last decade that weren't Oscar contenders. Well, I think, okay, I agree with you to a certain extent, because what people were looking at with Boyhood was filming it with the same actors over the course of a long time. That was pretty groundbreaking. Do I think it's the best coming of age movie? No. Do I think that Sing Street is probably a better film? I do. But again, and Sing Street was tough. There's Sing Street's more of a traditional film, though, and I think that it's a very good version of a traditional movie. I love Sing Street, but I agree with you that the release was botched. I think Sing Street should have been a much bigger film. It should have caught on with the youth market. I think part of it, and I thought about this a lot, I think part of it was the title. Now, in the movie it works, but Sing Street is not, I don't think, an appealing title for the very age group that probably would have appreciated this movie the most. Sing Street, I hate to say it, it isn't cool, man. I mean, they should have maybe called it Legends of Sing Street or something. But just Sing Street, I think, turned people off. Like, Sing Street? What is that, some animated musical? Is that for kids? What is it? And I think that would really hurt the film, too. So, yeah. I don't know. It should have. Mark C. says, I'm trying to imagine Omar's Superman as he punches a mugger in the face and it turns into a bloody mist. Sorry, no thanks. Yeah, but come on, man. Superman's not going to do that. He knows the limits of his power. No one is saying that Superman's going to go around and start killing muggers. I mean, he was fighting an Extinction-Level event where he saved billions of humans on Earth by killing Zod. I don't think that there was any reason to think that Zack Snyder was going to continue on and make Superman somebody that's going to use his superpowers and murder people. I just don't think he was going to do that. But in the case of Man of Steel, I don't think he had a choice. I don't see, what would he have done? Where would he have put Zod? You know? I mean, I think there was no choice. Jason Whitcomb is here and says, I respectfully disagree with Mark C. Their personas were larger than life. And I find it refreshing to know that these actors are regular people with their own beliefs. Hollywood is as corrupt as any business. Sorry, Mark. I think you might be right there. I mean, look at the financial... Look at how... You want to look at corrupt. Look at the financial sector. I mean, the one thing about Hollywood is usually the people that are here, they ultimately, at the end of the day, sure, do a lot of them want to indulge their egos and their appetites? Yes, but they also want to make great movies. I mean, at the end of the day, people who work in Hollywood, they want to make great movies. And I'm talking about the people that work in Hollywood, the people that are actually making movies. They want to make great movies. You know, there are some people that come to Hollywood that want to avail themselves of the perks, I suppose. But there's a lot of people that truly want to make great work, and that's why they're here. I think that there's other businesses that are far more corrupt. I mean, look what happened in the subprime mortgage meltdown. So I think Hollywood is just more visible. And when somebody does something messed up here, it becomes, you know, it's covered a lot more. And it's kind of a bummer. Dan V says, you have the perks of being a wallflower, the way back. By the way, I love the perks of being a wallflower. I love it. Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, dope. I love Dope. Edge of 17, a good movie. Booksmart, I think, is good. And Blinded by the Light, which I also really liked, in addition to Sing Street, with being better than Boyhood. Red Letter Media did a great review of Boyhood back in 2014. Oh, I'll have to watch that. I love, as you know, I'm a huge Red Letter Media fan. I love those guys. You know, I was reading about their little feud with Shatner, or Shatner's social media people. Bummer. Jason S. sends in a tip and says, yes, slavery was and is, that's right, is, there's much slavery still going on in the world, is a normal part of human life since humans have existed. What people don't talk about is the West decided to end slavery for the first time in human existence. But more people are enslaved around the world today than back then. That is a salient point that you have made. That is correct. And for instance, Britain ended slavery way before the United States did, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there was an effort to do that. The West did decide to end slavery, and the kind of slavery that exists now all over the world in various forms, it's still here. It's just different, and we need to end it. So I think that's a good point. That's a good point to make. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, concerning Willow's question on hot redheads. I think it's funny she asked that question since Joanne Whaley in the movie Willow is super hot. Joanne Whaley, who was married to Val Kilmer for a while, is super smoking hot. I totally forgot about her, but I agree. My kind of redhead, indeed. Joanne Whaley in Willow is super hot, and Stubble, that is... I have no alcohol here, but I will cheers to that because that's a hilarious comment. I wonder if Willow has seen Willow. Jason S. goes on and says, standing up to slavery was brave and hard to do back then. Slavery is normal in China today, who runs massive slave concentration camps. But Hollywood bends the knee to China and say and do nothing because it will threaten their way of life and income. Unfortunately, you're correct. Would anyone working in Hollywood put their income in jeopardy by boycotting Hollywood until they stop profiting from slavery by showing their movies in China and helping to fund it? Do you know anyone who will take a stand against the slavery in China? Well, hey, I have to say, you're making a very good point. And these are tough issues. Now, we could all say, yes, absolutely, we have to stand up to China. But the economic realities of how the world works today, could we do that effectively? I mean, I don't think that we can, which is unfortunate. And I think that that's something that we need to, I mean, that's a really great question to be asking now. And with everything that's going on, because we tend to get a little myopic when it comes to talking about slavery in this country. And like you said, there's slavery happening right now in China. And I think that's a very valid question to ask. And it's a tough issue. I mean, right now we have to do business with China. We are not, and it's our own fault, we are not in an economic position where we can't interact with China. Wouldn't it be great if the United States could take a stand like that and not worry about China? I mean, it's not just Hollywood is just one business of many, 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 many businesses. But unfortunately, I mean, when you make a $200 million movie, you have to be able to open it in China. And I agree. I mean, is that messed up? Yes. Is it messed up that we can't fight the injustices around the world? Yes. And that's why the questions that are raised with things like that are they're hard questions to ask, and they're hard questions to deal with. And they're very, I mean, on one hand, they're simple. It's like human rights must end. We know that human rights violations happen every day in China. We know that. And yet, we allow it to continue because by the way, who are we to tell the Chinese how to lead their lives? You know? I mean, they have to, I think that kind of reform, look, I think communism and the way they treat their own people also is problematic. But is that for us to decide? I mean, you know, I always go back to Star Trek. Go figure. But if you think about Star Trek and the idea of the non-interference directive, we might not like what a society is doing. But if we roll up in a Federation starship, who are we to say that their way of life, like, how can we justify going in and messing up the status quo in their society? I mean, is that a right thing to do? I don't know. I mean, we saw apartheid end in South Africa. The world got together and demanded change. So, I mean, we're not going to play Sun City. That was effective. That worked. And basically they put economic pressure on, and it was pretty effective. Could we do that? I don't know. I think it's definitely something to consider. But honestly, I don't know, Jason. I don't know if anyone working in Hollywood would put their income in jeopardy. I don't think anybody... I don't think we don't have the ability to do that because people need to make money. People need to work, especially now with 40 or 50 million Americans out of work. You know, I always think that activism, there's an element of activism on a large scale it's rough, man. It's rough, and I don't know if anybody can afford that right now. But I think you're absolutely right. I cannot disagree with what you're saying. So yeah, very, very interesting. See, compelling stuff today. This letter comes from Terry Flynn, our old moderator, the Sheriff of Nottingham himself. Terry Flynn says, "Dear Rob, this is a follow-up to my letter on Dark, which you kindly read out. I really intended to encourage something I know you already do, but many of us fans of your channel don't do sufficiently, namely investigate genre stuff outside of the English-speaking mainstream. By the way, I regard Japanese manga anime as something that has been relentlessly anglified or only investigated in its native form by a small segment of people. To me, Dark, especially now I've read the Reddit explanations of all the time travel interactions, etc., was clearly constructed with the same care and attention to detail that Mercedes-Benz devotes to even the smallest elements of a German car. But it's not simply a hyper-efficiently plotted German show. Its emphasis on relationships, particularly those between family members, is uncanny. Indeed, for Futurama fans, you'll get a moment where you both chuckle and go, ooh, but then hopefully think about how well the relationships make this plot inevitable. I won't spoil it by saying more. My fundamental point is that I found myself revisiting genre show suggestions that are funded and shown by Netflix, but which aren't English. 3% is another show that has really blown me away. There was an Indian one about revenge porn that was shocking and riveting, whose title escapes me, though I wonder if it might have gotten fully shown in India itself, given its content. Well, I'd watch that. If the pandemic does indeed decimate the English-speaking filmmaking machine, mostly Hollywood, but also the UK, Ireland, and Australasia, I do sincerely hope that the new openings are created for countries like Brazil, Germany, and others who have shown amazing creativity from the get-go, at least where Netflix is concerned. Indeed, a final thought about Dark. It is so well planned with such Teutonic efficiency and attention to detail, every possible flaw in the time travel story that you instinctively feel like it must be a show that is logical but has no soul, and nothing could be further from the truth. The real question is, how did a show illustrate the concept of Schrodinger's cat across 36 hours in a manner that also captured our hearts? Wow, I'll say no more other than watch it." That from Terry. What a great letter. Yeah, Dark, I've got to catch up with the third season. Elizabeth hasn't seen it. We're going to watch it. I think that's going to be our next binge. That, and doesn't it's the 25th. Doesn't Umbrella Academy drop on Netflix or something? I want to see that too. Guy Bottledorn is here. Let's see. Here, Guy Bottledorn says, "Greetings once more. Another quick physical media tip. The Arrow Alejandro Jodorowsky 4K restoration box set. For the moment, I could only find it on Zavi, and here's a link." Ooh. Wow. To get you in the mood, they made this quick YouTube presentation. Yeah, I will be getting the Jodorowsky box set that Arrow puts out. Here is, I will put this in the chat. Let's see. So there is that. And if you want the Zavi link for the Alejandro Jodorowsky 4K restorations, here they are. Here they are. There you go. Good letter. Thank you for that one, Guy. Very much appreciated. And let's see. This next one comes from Bob Connolly. "Hello, Rob. I'm happy you enjoyed my baseball letter the other day. I did. It was a fantastic letter. And it was cool to learn that you like baseball more than I'd realized. Today, though, I want to write about something I already know you're a fan of. Dawn of the Dead. The other day, I mentioned the film to one of my coworkers, and he said, 'Oh, I love that movie.' I made sure to clarify that I was referring to the original 1978 George Romero film. My coworker was mystified. It's actually it got a more of a public release in 2000. In 79. My coworker was mystified. He had no idea that there was a pre-2004 Dawn. This is someone who's a huge comic book collector and a massive Star Wars and Planet of the Apes fanatic. So he's definitely in the geek fold, but based on conversations we've had, he hasn't really seen that many movies. I didn't chide him. I didn't bark, "What's wrong with you?" Instead, I excitedly explained to him why Romero's Dawn was one of the greatest movies ever made, and why it is an absolute must-see. Finally, I told him, "I'm excited for you to see it." "Well, let me tell you, sir, you and I definitely park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorite movies of all time." I've known far too many people who react badly when someone tells them they haven't seen a certain movie or TV series. One of the things you learn when you start really diving into cinema is that for the first couple of years of that, you think, "Boy, I've seen a lot of movies." But there comes that moment when you realize just how much you haven't seen. Even now, after more than 20 years of being a true film fanatic, there are still plenty of films I haven't gotten around to yet that I want to watch. In fact, it's only been in the past couple of months that I watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Seven Samurai for the first time. Thoroughly enjoyed both of them, especially Seven Samurai, and it feels good to have checked another couple of big ones off the list. I have awesome action figures of all Seven Samurai, by the way. They're right over there. It's just always bothered me when I've seen people scold someone because they've never seen something. I've been on the receiving end of it myself, almost always from people who haven't seen nearly as many movies as I have, but who've just happened to see the one thing that I haven't yet. Besides just being generally rude, it's not a good way to encourage people to check something out. I didn't want my coworker to associate the original Dawn of the Dead with me being a jerk to him about it. Probably a good plan. What nicely done. See, this is the kind... Here it is, man. You are explaining the perfect kind of behavior that we as imagination connoisseurs should engage in. You know, you don't make fun of somebody. How many movies have been made? Thousands and thousands and thousands. To expect people to have seen every movie or every movie that you've seen, it's ridiculous. You haven't seen this? I hate it too. I hate that. And I've probably been guilty about saying that very thing to people, but it's not right. I didn't want my coworker to associate the original Dawn of the Dead with me being a jerk to him about it. Really, since being in high school in the late 90s, my friends and acquaintances have known me as a movie buff. I was once even dubbed IMDb, the interactive movie data Bob. I can steal that too. I've found, though, that through the course of some people are more receptive than others to watching things like With Nail and I, HUD, or The Man Who Came to Dinner. It can be a bigger uphill battle with shows like The Americans or Halt and Catch Fire. Halt and Catch Fire is the one show I've never seen that people have told me to watch the most, and I haven't done it yet. Though I had success with those too. But over time, I've tried to tailor my recommendations to people to things I think they would enjoy, even if those movies or shows might not necessarily be in their wheelhouse. Well, I'm going to chime in here. If somebody's not seen Dawn of the Dead now, we live in a post-Walking Dead world. We live in a post-How Many Zombie Train to Busan world. If someone has not seen Romero's Dawn of the Dead, I'll admit to you that I don't necessarily encourage people to go back and watch Dawn of the Dead unless I think they're a very discerning filmgoer. And that's not because I'm an elitist snob. But Dawn of the Dead was a low-budget film. One of the things that I loved about it was it set a tone, its satiristic take, the hell's a poppin' violence, the scope of it. I thought for a low-budget movie, it was like reading a great horror novel. And yet, if you go back and you watch it now for audiences today that have grown up on The Walking Dead, where the realistic violence and zombie mayhem has gotten to be so good that I find it difficult. As much as I love Dawn of the Dead, I saw it when it first came out. I was 12, man, and that movie left such an impression on me, and I will always love it for that reason. But I couldn't necessarily recommend somebody goes back to watch it today. I mean, I will recommend it, but they're never going to love it as much as I did, because when you see a movie and how you see a movie is important. And I don't think that Dawn of the Dead can transcend. I mean, if you're a smart, discerning filmgoer and you love watching movies from all eras, I'd say okay. But most audience members today, you know, going back, I've talked about going back longer than 20 years ago can be a stretch for people. And asking somebody to go back over 40 years to watch a low-budget horror film that the genre has become so ingrained in horror film history now that it's tough. It's tough. And you go on. I understand that we have certain types of films we gravitate towards. For instance, I've got a thing for buddy cop movies, and I consider Lethal Weapon 2 in particular to be the cinematic equivalent of a big bowl of mac and cheese wrapped up in a nice warm blanket. But I wouldn't really say I have a favorite genre or favorite type of movie or show. There are a lot of people out there who seem to only ever want to watch horror, sci-fi, or fantasy, while there are others who will write off genre films almost completely. As someone who has a lot of time for everything from Gremlins 2 to Sunset Boulevard to Commando, it can be a bit disheartening that some people can be so unwilling to try new things. As I said above, I will never get on someone for not having seen something, but I do want to encourage people to take a look at things they might not have otherwise. According to a check of my IMDb profile, I've rated 2,845 titles, which I'm sure is a drop in the bucket compared to you. I have not rated films really on the IMDb. I have no idea. The thing is, though, it makes me happy when I see my watch lists on streaming services and the number of films I record daily on Turner Classic Movies that I still haven't seen. It's exciting to know that there is much more to discover. I'm also happy that I live close to Reckless Video, one of the few video stores that's still out there. If you live in North Seattle, it's a wonderful neighborhood video store with a huge selection of DVDs and Blu-rays to rent, many of which are things you can't find on any streaming service. Thanks for reading this, Rob. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to buy some Beecher's mac and cheese at the grocery store and rent some movies I've never seen at Reckless. Well, Bob, another great letter. Thank you for writing it in. You know, I'm like right there with you. Here's how I judge movies. I could watch, like you said, I could go and watch Sunset Boulevard and then watch Commando right afterwards. Now, I always ask myself, the authors of the film, did the producers and the writers and the actors and the director, did they succeed in making the movie they set out to make? I watch movies of all genres, and you know, if you want to watch a film noir, you go back to Double Indemnity or you go back to a Sunset Boulevard, they still work just as well as they did when they were made. Of course, they're black and white, and yes, they're dated, but that's the way they were. And a lot of people can't get past that. A lot of people can't get past, well, it's black and white, I'm not going to watch it. They can't get past the dated period dress or the language, or they just can't. And I understand that, and I don't begrudge them for it. That's when I go to a museum, if I don't know anything about the artist that I'm going to see, I don't get as much out of it. If I do research, however, read up on whatever exhibit I'm going to see, read up on the artists themselves, I get so much more out of it. But there are a lot of people that are never going to, you can never force anybody to get as much out of it as, say, you. But, you know, I learned when I worked in video stores for 8 years, I learned to kind of judge people. I would ask people like, well, what kind of movies do you like? And once I had like 3 or 4 movies, now we have algorithms do this, of course, but you'd get a sense of what, not just the kind of movies they'd like, but the approach to the material. Like if somebody liked, you know, if somebody said to me they liked Lethal Weapon 2 more than Lethal Weapon 1, I'm like, okay, I get that. I understand that. And then I might say, well, if you've not seen Midnight Run, you might like Midnight Run. You know, whereas Lethal Weapon 1 is a much more dour, serious affair. It still kicks ass. But Lethal Weapon 2 begins with the Looney Tunes Warner Brothers fanfare. Dun, 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 dun. Smash cut to inside a car and Riggs is screaming and pounding the top of the car. It announces itself as a cartoon right away. And so if somebody if they like that more than they like the seriousness of Lethal Weapon 1, well, it says something, and you know what you can recommend to people. And I think that's perfectly valid. Absolutely. And let's see who is here. Dan V says, well, we know the NBA won't stand up to slavery in China with what happened along with the gaming industry, where a man who won a competition said, free Hong Kong, and was banned while having his winnings taken away. It's not just Hollywood. Oh, I know. I know. I mean, unfortunately, in this day and age, I mean, the way things are, certain activism is luxury. So, yeah. So, it's a bummer. But you're absolutely right. People have their livelihood. Julius Goodwin goes on and sends in a super chat and says, just wrote you a letter asking about details about sending you a bottle of wine, probably from Stephen Amell's winery, and likely going to be pink wine for dudes. Yes, that's actually a brand. They sell pink wine for dudes. Would that be a rosé? Well, Julius, you're a very generous man. I thank you for that, and I will figure out how to get you that information. So yeah. Willow says in Canada, probably over 80% of the items we buy has made in China on it. It's the same with the States. How can we take any stand against the country when we're so dependent so much on them for goods? Shrug. I know. No, I mean we're in this situation ourselves. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's we did it to ourselves. Look, China can manufacture things cheaper than we can in the United States. They just can. We've priced ourselves out of that market, and we did it to ourselves. And you're absolutely right. And it's you know, it is my hope. I don't think I'm going to see it in my lifetime, but I do think that we will all further evolve together. You know, as more people are globally connected, as more information is out there, I think people want to be able to lead the lives that they want to lead. And I think things will work themselves out. I mean, I do believe that. I don't know how long it's going to take. Dieter Shiny Bastion is here. Hello, Dieter. Greetings, Rob. Considering Willow's redheads, I put Hermione Corfield from Sea Fever in the mix. Even if I think she's not a natural redhead, just fuel your private jet and get your ass over here if Tenet should start earlier in Europe. Fingers crossed. Well, Dieter, I should. By the way, Dieter did send me Sea Fever on Blu-ray, which I have not watched yet. Yeah, I think you might be right about that she's not a real redhead. Yeah. Jet Screamer says, Tanya Roberts, do see Halt and Catch Fire. Everyone says that. Wonderful show. You know what? I don't even know what Halt and Catch Fire is even about. I should just turn it on and start watching it. I honestly don't know. I've never read it up. Yeah, I've never seen it, but I've got to see it. Dan V sends in a tip and says, have you seen Guilty by Suspicion starring De Niro? I have seen Guilty by Suspicion. As being accused of being a communist as a film director. I like it, and you bringing that up happening in Hollywood reminded me of that film. It's a great double bill with The Crucible, which I also love. Yeah, I love Guilty by Suspicion. Didn't Irwin Winkler direct Guilty by Suspicion? I don't remember. But yeah, it's good. Guilty by Suspicion's really good. Plus, we can't hear that's enough. I mean, that's cancel culture now. That's come out of academia is very, very frustrating. And people don't care. You'll get wrong think now being punished. I mean, we're the rise of people calling themselves Marxists. It's like, did you not pay attention to the 20th century? Scary stuff. Jared McBride sent in a super chat and said, I'm so excited for Cobra Kai Season 3 coming to Netflix. Yep, leaving Facebook and coming to Netflix, which is very, very cool, which is amazing. And this letter comes from Chris Crane. I don't think Chris Crane's ever sent me a letter before. Chris Crane. Hi, Rob. I'm a movie fan, but I don't know much about the behind-the-scenes economics. I'm always surprised when a movie that is well-reviewed with a known cast and a bit of a budget manages to fly under the radar. T2 Trainspotting, for example. Trainspotting 2. Loved it so much. It was my most anticipated film of 2017. There was a big, expensive-looking Glasgow premiere for the film in January of that year, with all of the film's stars in attendance. The reviews started coming in, and they were pretty good. I think it's a wonderful movie. And it's one of my favorite sequels ever. It was the end of March before the film actually opened in the U.S., and during that period between the premiere and the release here, I don't remember seeing any of the cast doing major promotion. No late-night TV talk shows, for example. Director Danny Boyle was out hustling as much as he could, but that was about it. I saw a coming soon poster at one of the multiplexes in town, but by opening day, the film was not playing at any of those locally. I saw the film during its second weekend in Cincinnati, and it was playing at only one very small theater. I was one of maybe 6 or 7 people at the screening that afternoon. The IMDb says the film grossed just under $2.5 million in the U.S. with a budget of $18 million. While that would be a flop domestically, the film doesn't feel like a typical misfire. It just felt like no one was really aware it was out. I definitely wasn't expecting it to make hundreds of millions of dollars, but as a sequel to a beloved film with pretty good reviews, as well as an excellent cast, director, and soundtrack, I was surprised it had so little buzz. So my question is, how does this kind of thing happen? No money for promotion? Some sort of theatrical distribution problem? Would they make a movie like this without enough promotional money? Was all of this a surprise to the director and the cast? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you, and keep up the good work. Chris Crane. P.S. David Schwimmer's 2010 film Trust is a similar situation. That one had great reviews, a good cast, very relevant subject matter, and it went virtually unseen. It was a lower budget, however. I haven't seen Trust, but clearly you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay because I like you, this is actually a really good question. You know, it really comes down to, I have no idea why Trainspotting 2 didn't cause any kind of a splash. Trainspotting, I think, is one of the most beloved, I think it came out in 96, is one of the most beloved films of the 90s. I mean, although I would say this, I don't know how well Trainspotting is known here in America. I love Trainspotting. I've owned it on multiple formats over the years. I think it's a wonderful film. Trainspotting 2, one of the best sequels ever made, bringing all the characters back after 20 years. It's beautifully made, Academy Award-winning director. It's got a great cast. I think what happened was, if I were to venture a guess, I would say that, look, anybody wants to release a Danny Boyle movie, but they probably did some kind of marketing research. And the research came back, nobody cared. Most people who they asked, it was like, nah, they probably didn't know what it was. I mean, again, it was over 20 years old, or maybe it wasn't over 20. It was like just about 20 years old. Trainspotting is sort of a culty movie. It was big with colleges, that kind of thing, 25 years ago. But I think they probably did market research. And I mean, I too, I couldn't believe that there was so little marketing for Trainspotting 2. Hardly any at all. And I couldn't believe it because I was totally excited for the film and I loved it. And I couldn't believe, like, there was no buzz at all. I honestly think they did some research, found out that there was no anticipation for it. Now, you have to remember, a lot of the time, like, I go back and tell the story. So I made a feature-length documentary on the making of Tron when I was working for Curdy Pellerin. It was the 20th anniversary DVD double disc set of Tron that was coming out in 2002. Well, Disney, as they are wont to do, did market research, and it was told to me that they interviewed mothers with children 5 and under, how excited they were for the DVD release of Tron for the first time. Zero. There was nobody cared. None of the people they were interviewing cared. Well, they asked, just give us like 15 minutes. Well, I went ahead and made an 88-minute documentary. I tracked down as many people as I could. I did as many interviews as I could. And I turned in an 88-minute documentary I'm very proud of. I think it's on YouTube. It's called The Making of Tron. Go figure. And they were surprised, Disney was surprised when Tron came out on DVD in 2002. It was their biggest catalog seller of that year. And huge. It was huge. Well, I could have told you that. Why would you interview mothers or ask mothers with children 5 and under if they're interested in Tron? I mean, Tron is a movie that people who are now gamers grew up with. And of course they were excited. The DVD format was at its height in 2002. I could have told you that. You don't have to do any market research with me. Well, it depends who they interviewed. I could see them interviewing a lot of people, asking maybe people who were younger about Trainspotting 2. And people are like, huh? What? You know, they didn't have they didn't ask the right people. So the movie they were contractually obligated to release it. You know, it came out. It did nothing. It did no business here at all. And I mean, I can't believe it. I think a lot of people didn't even know. I've talked to people recently that didn't even know that they made a sequel to Trainspotting, much less one that has Ewan McGregor in the starring role and brings back the entire cast, especially when you have shows like Elementary on. I mean, they could have cross-promoted it. I think that they just let it die on the vine because they thought, based on whatever research they did, that, you know, nobody wanted to see it, which, what a bummer, right? But I own it. So that's good for me. This letter comes from Eric Gant. Eric says, "Greetings, Rob. I'm going to like this letter. Back in 1966, I built the 1/420th scale USS Defiant kit produced by AMT from Deep Space Nine. It was a fun build and a beautiful representation of the ship, but I always lamented the fact that it wasn't in the same scale as my treasured model of the Enterprise D, or with any other Trek model in my collection. Coming in at roughly 18 inches long, it took up as much shelf space as the 1400 scale Enterprise, when it should have been much, much smaller, around 4 to 5 inches in the same scale. It just looked wrong. Fast forward to the lockdown, and I find myself rediscovering my love for model building. And lo and behold, I learned that Polar Lights had recently released a new model of the Defiant. At 1/1000 scale, it was still much too large to scale with my 1400th scale Enterprise D and E kits, but it was much closer than its giant predecessor. And it was perfectly in scale to the original and refit Enterprise kit made by the same company. Needless to say, this new iteration of the tough little ship immediately found a spot on my go-to or to-get list. A few days ago, I learned that a local hobby shop had the kit in stock. I go to pick it up, and right there, front and center, was the 1/1000 scale Discovery Enterprise. Against my better judgment, I decided to give it a closer look. I feel you, man. I do. I'm embarrassed, but you and I can share this. We can share our pain, like Cybok would say. A few days ago, I learned that a local hobby shop had the kit in stock. I go to pick it up, and right there, front and center, was the 1/1000 scale Discovery Enterprise. Against my better judgment, I decided to give it a closer look. I'm not going to lie, something about having the box in my hands and studying the box art in person really drew me in. The show may not be great, but I honestly kind of like the design of the ship. I like the way it manages to be both modern and classic at the same time, preserving the silhouette of the original Constitution class while incorporating additional details and texture to make it look more realistic. I came this close to grabbing the kit, but ended up putting it back on the shelf. Unfortunately, my disdain for the current Trek stuff tainted my ability to completely embrace the design. The look of the ship itself, I can live with it, but the story and universe it inhabits, that's a hard pill to swallow. I just couldn't make the leap required to accept that the story and characters we met in Discovery are part of the same fictional history depicted in other Star Trek films and TV shows. They are not. They are not. And that wasn't the only issue. When I checked out a few YouTube reviews of the kit, I was taken aback by the size of the thing. Held side by side with the model of the original Enterprise in the same scale, the Discovery version is twice as large as it should be. As you've probably gathered, I'm a bit of a scale freak. Any model builder is. I'm right there with you. In my mind, there was just no way that this could be a reimagined version of the same ship we met in TOS. Either that or the model company seriously screwed up when tooling the thing. This line of thought led me doing a little research on some sci-fi modeling sites. After some digging around, I learned that the size difference is intentional. As was the case with the JJ Prize, the Disco Prize is larger than the real Constitution-class Enterprise, and that can only mean one thing. The Discovery timeline isn't just an updated, reimagined version of the main Trek timeline. It's an altogether new timeline, separate from both the main timeline and the JJ-verse. Part of me finds the addition of yet another timeline to the Trek universe troubling, but there's an eternally optimistic side of me that sees this as a positive. It makes it easier to accept the inconsistencies in both canon and tone that made Discovery feel unconnected. Viewed as something taking place in an alternate timeline, I think I can learn to live with it. I can learn to live with it. So here's where I'm at. Everything in the original canon is still intact. Our Spock never had a sister. There was never a starship that used mushrooms and giant tardigrades to jump through space. In our timeline, our Picard didn't wind up quitting an ugly, coarse version of Starfleet due to his sheer fucking hubris. In our Star Trek universe, there never was a cybernetic, Lovecraftian elder god threatening to destroy civilization. All that happened in a grim, dark, alternate timeline. Indeed. Which brings me to the upcoming series Strange New Worlds and the newest reimagining of the Enterprise. If I approach it as a series taking place in an alternate universe, I think I might be able to get into it. After all, we've seen mirror universe stories in TOS, Enterprise, and Deep Space Nine, and I can live with them. Discovery, Picard, and Strange New Worlds are just stories taking place in yet another mirror universe, right next door to the one we've already seen. And the mirror universe depicted in Discovery is just a mirror of the mirror of the mirror. And maybe this time, with the benefit of hindsight, the creators of Strange New Worlds will give us something that feels a bit more like the Trek that we've all been missing. Or maybe not. After the last few series, it's starting to feel like we're living in a Peanuts comic in which CBS is Lucy, Star Trek is the football, and the fans are a collective Charlie Brown, holding on to hope that this time she won't yank the ball away. But that's negative thinking. For better or worse, I'm holding on to hope. I'm going to get that new Enterprise kit, and I'm going to watch Strange New Worlds. This time, we're finally going to kick the ever-loving fuck out of that football. And if not, there's always the next time. As of right now, there's no other option. So I will learn to live with it. Because I can live with this. I can live with it. On second thought, Alexa, erase this entire letter. Yeah, man. I mean, there's absolutely there's been no attempt on the part of the new showrunners to make their Star Trek work. None. Zero. And it's difficult. Like the ships, you can't tell me that it's supposed to be canonical when the size of the ships are totally different. Because it's not. So yes. I totally agree with you. I kind of like this design because it fits in with the NX-01. But also I kind of hate it too because of the size differential. But what can you do? I wanted to build it because it's the Enterprise. You know, have to have all the different iterations. I already read Jared McGrath. You know, the thing about Cobra Kai, Jared, that I didn't say is that it's a show done right. I can't believe that show exists and it's done so well. It's amazing. I mean, I would hold it up with Ryan Coogler's Creed as one of the best examples of how to continue on a franchise decades later. It's amazing. Nick Parrish is here. Nick Parrish says, "What up, Rob? So, Rob, Night of the Creeps. Fred Decker's Night of the Creeps is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I finally found a collector's edition Blu-ray of the movie. I have that. But, Rob, those fools at Walmart are trying to charge a brother 27 greenbacks for it. Is that too much for a 1986 movie, Rob? Even if it is great and has Tom Atkins in it as the greatest shotgun-wielding, tough-talking detective of all time?" Well, Night of the Creeps, I believe, is out of print, is it not? Let's see. You said that it is the Blu-ray. Let's see. Let's take a look. Well, Night of the Creeps, the Blu-ray, you can get one of the Blu-rays for $22. Let's see about the Shout Factory Collector's Edition. No, you can get it for $23.99. Buy it off their website. Go buy it at Shout Factory. Yeah, go get that. Because why not? $27 is too much. Although there's the director's cut, too. And the director's cut, wow, you might have to get both of them. I don't know. I'd have to look into that. Now I want to know. I don't know. So, yeah, it's too much. Go get it from Amazon. Jason S. sends in a tip and says, I hope that Darth Maul show that is going to get made for Disney Plus doesn't get canceled because Ray Park decided to post a graphic blowjob video of himself on Instagram. I heard about this. Did he do that? Yeah, I heard that he did. I don't know much about it, but yeah, I hope so too. I mean, I hope Ray Park gets to play him again. But why would he do that? You know? That's a tough one. Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, is the Blu-ray of TNG 16:9 and is it superior to the Netflix streaming version? No. Star Trek The Next Generation is not 16:9. It was never going to ever be 16:9. The visual effects were finished to be 4:3, and a lot of the live action photography was only protected for 4:3. But so they'll never make a 16:9 version of Next Gen. But the Blu-rays, if I do say so myself, they look incredible. The episodes look incredible. But you get our special features that I worked on for 3 years with Roger Lay Jr. and the Akutas. So I cannot recommend Next Generation on Blu-ray more than, I mean, you got to get them. It's amazing. They're amazing. And you can get the whole series cheap now. Honest Asian Guys here. Hey, Rob. The Spirit of Master Splinter scene from the 1990 Ninja Turtles film still chokes me up. After 30 years, this is still the only Turtles film that gets everything right. Thanks, and enjoy your weekend. Yeah, I celebrated the 30th anniversary of that on this show. I think you're right. I liked the first Turtles movie. I thought it did get everything right. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was well done all the way around. So I agree with you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Robservations episode 475. My God, I can't believe it. 475 comes to an end. I want to thank you for supporting the channel via tips and super chats and sending me letters. I've got some upcoming letters and videos to play. I think BL Alley has sent me another video as ongoing series making fun of me, which I think is delightful. That'll be coming up soon. And, yeah, so I want to thank you all for keeping me going by continuing to send me amazing letters. What a great bevy of letters that you all had to send to me today. I'm constantly impressed by what I get from you guys. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank, I don't even know who's here. I want to thank the Richard. Haynock is here. Robert Pariso. All of you guys. And, yeah. So thanks for being a great moderating staff. As always, you can go find the Richard on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page and the Whining About Movies Facebook page. Usually he's having some kind of watch party or doing something crazy, which is very cool. So thank him for me. Go find the Richard. And that is awesome. I will be back tomorrow. I don't know what time yet because we're going to do a little shindig for Elizabeth's birthday, which is actually on Monday. And I'll probably be back on the John Campy Show, my show, and we're doing Whining About Movies, which I will announce tomorrow of what that's going to be. But anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, I'm ending, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity, this show, Robservations, episode 475. Thanks very much. And as always, have a better day.